just keep talking. If something happens, I'll let you guys know. We're going to start here in about a minute. I'm going to put on, just to give you a little technicality,
Can you give me a phone number in case you freeze that I could actually call so I don't have to go through Keith?
310-722-6562. That's my cell phone number.
Okay, so I'll text you if there's a problem.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much.
Quite welcome. So we'll just real quick, I'll play the commercial, the sponsor, click on, I'll do the announcements, the introduction, introduce you guys, go through the questions. Henry, make sure to have the trailer set up for about half hour into the show, and then I'll cue that. I send it to your email, Henry. Then we'll continue talking. Close out the show at about 5 minutes. I got to do another closing with the Veteran Summit special, and then we'll end exactly at 2 o'clock. Okay. We are live.
We're live now?
We are. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to The Council. I'm your host, Charlie Pacello, and boy, do we have a fantastic show for you today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to The Council each and every week. We have been doing a very special summit series, a Veteran Summit series here for our veterans and our loved ones who love our veterans, to help them understand more about trauma and how trauma affects us. The council here has partnered up with the Trauma Sensitive Awareness Foundation, and this is a special summit series that KUHS TV has partnered up to do this interview series to provide veterans and their loved ones with information, hope, inspiration, and healing. It's first of its kind summit. We're exploring cutting edge treatments and alternative therapies for PTS, traumatic brain injury, moral injury, sleep disturbance, family conflict, emotional trauma, childhood trauma, and so much more. We're talking to mental health experts, veterans, and their advocates, and are going to provide answers, resources, and solutions to bring all of our warriors home. We're starting the dialogue, and we've been doing it for the last few weeks here, so please enjoy the conversation. Come on and enjoy the conversation. We're going to learn so much more in part 2 that's going to be debuting in November. And so join us all the way through September 25th here on KUHSdenver.com. KUHS, we are the stream. We're broadcasting here from beautiful Denver, Colorado. And we are the #1 TV radio streaming service here in Colorado. And our commitment is to provide the best to our listeners and our watchers with best live video programming in the world, from a variety of musical genres to include DJ performances here in the studio, outstanding talk shows with so many incredible personalities and people. And we just have some of the most talented TV radio hosts, personalities, professionals, and programming you will find anywhere on the internet or traditional media. We continue to grow our reach beyond our wildest imaginations. We are touching people all over this globe, all over this world. The council is being listened to by people from at least 80 different countries and 6 different continents. We thank all of you. Our mission is to continue to bring the quality program that reflects the diversity of our staff, our country, and to have honest, grounded, authentic conversations about the many issues which confront our society. So thank you, folks, for tuning in today. And, I don't want to spend too much talking about, usually I have an opening monologue that I do, but I want to introduce our guests here because they have such an important message to talk to you about in the impact of childhood trauma and the things that impact us and how it impacts us when we become adults. The ACEs study is one of the most important studies that has been done in the last 20 years. the adverse childhood experiences. It was done by a guy named Dr. Vincent Folletti and Dr. Robert Anda for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in San Diego, California. And they were trying to understand why people were having these problems when they were adult. And Dr. Folletti was working with people who were struggling with extreme obesity. And he would put them on this diet, they'd lose all this weight, they'd get back on the diet, or they'd get off the diet, and then they'd gain all the way back on again, and they couldn't understand it. And so he started asking questions, deeper questions, and what he discovered was that a lot of the people that he was working with had trauma from their childhood, terrible traumas, that they hadn't been able to process or misdiagnosed. Things that, they were being given diagnoses about things that it wasn't the cause of their problem, but this was the symptom of their problem. And so they did this enormous study, and what they learned was that the more early adverse experiences that you have in your childhood, family dysfunction, the greater your risk for all sorts of health problems when you become an adult. This information is so important for veterans and their families, because oftentimes veterans come home and they are dealing with the trauma from war, for the trauma from their service, and they're resistant to getting help. They're resistant to getting people, to talking about this stuff, because they want to be tough, they want to be strong. And what ends up happening is that you end up inadvertently, unconsciously or consciously directing that towards your kids, and you traumatize them, and so this stuff gets passed down. And so that's why it's so important for veterans to understand the importance of what childhood trauma can lead to. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my esteemed guest. It is such an honor and a privilege to have both of you on here. Darrell Hammond is an American actor, stand-up comedian, and impressionist. He is one of the longest-running cast members on Saturday Night Live and has famously portrayed President Bill Clinton, Ronald Reagan, and George W. Bush, among others. He is the author of the New York Times bestseller, God, If You're Not Up There, I'm effed. And it is fantastic. I read it, I was moved, I was touched, and it brought a lot of eye-opening. It made me realize a lot of things that I had overlooked in my childhood too. So take a look at this book. It was released on audiobook and it was narrated by Darrell himself. The film Cracked Up detailed his life and career, was released at the end of last year, and Michelle is an award-winning filmmaker, poet, and social activist. Her most recent film, Cracked Up, the Darrell Hammond story, had its theatrical premiere in September 2019 and was released on Netflix on May 1st, 2000. Oh, I think I have to put this plugged in here for just a second. Give me a second here, folks, as I fix this. It's this. The battery's low.
Battery's low?
Oh,
You didn't turn on.
I didn't do that. Thank you for your patience, folks.
You're welcome.
We're just dealing with little technical issues. These technical difficulties happen. We're watching ourselves. It's one of those things you have, we are fixing the problem.
Can your viewers see and hear us if we don't want to talk if they're...
Not yet. We're getting it
Okay,
taken.
so we can talk amongst ourselves and nobody can hear us.
Yes, we can talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, so right after Darrell, when you got froze and then you clicked off.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, bye.
Okay, folks, one of the things we deal with when we're doing live audiences is technical difficulties. So that's what happens. We have also, after Dale, we have Michelle Eisrich, who is the director of the film Cracked Up. It is an amazing film. She has is a poet and social activist. Her most recent film, Cracked Up, the Daryl Hammond story, had its theatrical premiere in September 2019 and was released on Netflix on May 1st, 2020. Thank you both, Daryl and Michelle, for joining me on the show. Okay. People, when they were talking about this movie, they were utterly transfixed. I mean, this is what formerly known as Eva Ensler, was saying about the film. I was utterly transfixed. It is so powerful, so moving, so true, so important. It is such a powerful film about trauma and how lodged memories can destroy our lives and how deeply people need help to unravel these memories, rather than being diagnosed with illnesses that end up keeping them drugged and numb. Much love and admiration. And Dr. Bessel van der Kolk is the world expert in childhood trauma. He's the author of The Body Keeps the Score. He says the world desperately needs to see this movie. Almost every day I see more reports of misdiagnoses and psychiatric mismanagement that makes me wonder if psychiatry overall may be doing more harm than good. You and Dale have given us hope out of the darkness. Welcome to the council, Daryl and Michelle. Okay, your documentary movie, Cracked Up, I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. And for anyone wanting to know and understand the impact of the early adverse childhood experiences, the consequences of trauma, you've got to see this film. It's transformative. And I believe it can really change the conversation on how we look at the devastating impact trauma has on our minds, our bodies, and our souls. Now, as we're working out these technical issues, I want to show you the first time that I got confronted with the ACEs study. And I was working with a group called the Mindful Warrior Project. And we were doing some work with the veterans down living on Skid Row in Los Angeles. And we were doing some work that really helped them out, giving them mindfulness. And these guys were living in some of the harshest, most difficult conditions that you could live in. And they were at the end of their rope. And so, we were trying to give them something that they could hold on to. And so we went down and we gave them these mindfulness techniques and got invited to go to this conference down in Fullerton, California. And in Fullerton, California, we did this. It was sponsored by the Batterers Intervention Program, the Institute of Violence, Abuse, and Trauma. And in that conference, there was this doctor by the name of Dr. Bob Geffner, and he was talking about the ACEs study and how important this ACEs study was and that we needed to get out there. And this was the first time I'd ever heard about it. First time. And I ended up nearly falling out of my chair because of what was being revealed. And he says, we've got to get this information out to people to inform them and let them know what is going on. And he put up an MRI scan of a 6-year-old's brain who had been in one of these high conflict situations, a lot of issues and problems that the family was going through. And he put that MRI scan next to a soldier who'd been in severe combat. That MRI scan of that 6-year-old's brain scanned exactly the same as the soldier who'd experienced severe combat. The interior insula had changed and the amygdala had changed. And when I looked at that, I was just confounded. I nearly fell out of my chair. I was like, how in the world could this, can that be? And I recognized that was my brain. I recognized that was, that's something that I had been dealing with as a child. And it made me realize, my God, and I had to leave the conference because I was so like overwhelmed by the emotion and by the feeling of it. I had experienced that kind of early childhood trauma when my dad came back from his service in Vietnam, because my parents had problems, they had trouble, they had the things that a lot of families and veterans that deal with, and I watched my parents, those early memories of them hurting each other. And so it affected me, and it just, because I was one of those kind of kids who was very sensitive and thoughtful and wanted to, who loved his parents, and it affected me, and it damaged me, and I didn't know it, because as a kid you wanted to love your parents, and then I got away, and there was something wrong. I was constantly sad, I was constantly depressed, even when I was in service, there was something deeper that I hadn't been able to deal with, to acknowledge. And it wasn't until I heard about this study that it's all of a sudden it was like, wow, now it makes sense. Now I understand what in the world is going on. And if I could make that connection, then I could finally start to do something about it. And it was an eye-opener for me. It made me realize that trauma is at the core of most of our problems and most of our issues. And and I ended up bringing those images to show to my dad, to show them the MRI scan of the brain. And I remember when I showed him, he was like, he got really quiet, he got really silent. And this was in California when I was living there. And he got really quiet and silent, and he just was really, got a tear in his eye. And he said to, son, my war was for 4 years. He says, your war was for 42. And, I don't know how you came back. And so that's why, understanding the depths and the pain of those early childhood experiences and really getting a proper diagnosis is so critical and so key. And this movie, Cracked Up, is amazing. And once we get Michelle and Daryl on, as we're correcting our technical issues, and these things happen, folks, it is one of the most heart-wrenching, moving, touching, funny, incredible films that you could watch. I mean, I felt like when I saw part of myself, in Daryl's story, and I think that's one of the reasons why both Michelle and Daryl wanted to do this story. Is to do the show is to share their experience of doing this film with us. Hi, Michelle, I think you're with us. Can you hear us?
Yeah. Yes. I can hear you.
All right, if one of you, let's see if we, Daryl, could you just share with us about how the project came up and how you guys started out with this, and what was the, what made you guys both decide to put this film together?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, Michelle and I have known each other a number of years, and I'd say 7 or so years ago, she really sort of sold me on the idea that we could make a film that might help people, because I'd had access to these world-class doctors, and the stuff they had to say was revolutionary about trauma, being a trauma patient. I'd also written that book, and then she had helped me work on the play as a book, a play, and a movie, and so she knew the project backwards and forwards, and she had quite a vision. I didn't know she was going to be such a great filmmaker. I just thought, I didn't know she had a lot of talent, to be honest with you. But, I mean, the movie's translated into 5 languages. It's been a big hit on Netflix, and it's all her. She filmed me for 7 years, and I'm pretty glad I did it, and I'm hoping not me, but some of these doctors that talk in the film.
So Daryl was very self-effacing, and obviously it is not all me. It's a team effort. I could not have made this film without Daryl. He's one of the most courageous people I've ever met in my entire life. It was not easy to make this film, and for both of us, but especially for Daryl to put himself out in front of the whole world to see his insides, right? But we both knew that it was going to help people. We just had a knowing that it was going to help people. And I would say that the reason that I wanted to make the film was because Daryl had related to me something that his doctor, Dr. Cotby, who's in the film, told him. He told him not to call what he had a mental illness, but to call it a mental injury. Mm-hmm. And when I heard mental injury versus mental illness, the shame that I felt as a trauma survivor, as a recovering addict, completely lifted, and I felt this wave of compassion, and I felt this is such important information. I felt that this was urgent. Like, I had to let everybody I know, and I had to let the world know in whatever way that we could, because Daryl had been misdiagnosed for, over and over and over for many, many years, and same with myself and so many people that I knew. And so I think really it's about having the proper, helping people to understand what they have. That's what the film is doing for people. It's helping people we get letters that come in every day that say,
mm-hmm. Well, it is, and I can understand why you get the letters, because it is something that has such a powerful impact. And it certainly moved me beyond anything. I didn't know what to expect when I watched it, and it was just, it touched on to those feelings and those memories. I mean, it was powerful, and it's moving and poignant. And Daryl, your dad was a veteran, right? He was. Where did your dad serve, and where? We're holding another technical difficulty here. Excuse me. So it's just charging up a little bit, and we'll get it right here. Well, folks, thank you for your patience. We have, I think Mercury must be in retrograde. One of the planets has got to be in retrograde. Maybe it's Mars. Maybe there's just technical issues that just happen that make things more challenging. But we're going to get this information to you regardless. We're doing our very best to make this happen here and give you this information, folks. So please bear with us as we correct our audio issues. Another thing about, when we're talking about ACEs and the adverse childhood experiences, there are 10 categories that are involved with ACEs, and it showcased. All right, did you ever experience at any time in your childhood emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, feeling unsupported, divorce or separation, substance abuse, mental illness, suicide, family member in prison, or any kind of trauma things that that children express? So those are the categories, and when you look at the different things that are happening in a child's mind, the child is developing at that stage. They're growing, they are expanding, and from 0 to 5 is this enormous, it's this huge window of growth. And anything that they experience, that they feel, is absorbed. Everything that they look, everything that they touch, every expression from their parents, all of that stuff is being recorded in their brain, is being recorded in their mind. And so it's difficult to there's nothing that filters from a child's brain. There's nothing that blocks that. And so we don't understand we're just starting to understand the depth of the impact that these early adverse experiences are having. And so hopefully we're being able to hear Michelle and Dale right now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Apologize. Forgive me here for the technical issues. Like to get back to the question on Dale. I know your dad was a veteran. Could you just share with us where he served and where?
He was in the Army in Germany and in Korea. He's a lieutenant.
That was.
He came home with what?
That was my rank. I was a lieutenant as well. I was just saying.
Yeah, I feel like his final word. Well, I not feel like his final words were. First of all, my father's death was made me believe in God so much. The things that happened, and his final words were, "I'm sorry I let my anger be more important to me than my children."
Wow.
And he was mad. He was angry all the time. He broke things all the time. He was frightening. But the final few days of his life, we bonded over what it was like to be a soldier. And made me feel like I had a dad my whole life. Beautiful man, tough man. He said, I feel like in my lifetime I was a good soldier, but that's about it. I'm sorry I was angry being more important to me than my children. And no, we bonded right there at the deathbed. And I spent the last couple of weeks with him talking about his life as a soldier. It became incredibly important to me. And I got shot a couple times. Mm-hmm. He had medals. My sister has some of them, and I have some of them for valor. But man, if you've never, unless you've spent a little bit of time talking to an ex-soldier or a soldier, particularly someone that you love, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get what these beautiful people go through and how important they are. It's quite an experience, so I don't want to get weepy about it. So ask Michelle a question.
Well, Michelle, when you first, we have a lot of misdiagnoses, trauma that's not diagnosed. What do you think are some of the warning signs for people who are suffering from trauma? Signs that veterans might be expressing when someone is like fighting his or her demons and may not realize it, and they're trying to be a good parent. They're trying to be a good to their children, but that the experience that they've had, the trauma that they have, and I think when you were just we were talking earlier, you had experienced a little bit of that triggering before we got on air. How can we address the trauma that is preventing us from being the parent that we would want to be?
But I just wanted to say my father was a veteran. He was in the Navy, although he was not in combat, but I just wanted to acknowledge him as a veteran as well. Well, there's a lot of questions in that question, but what I would say is the first you asked, what are symptoms, you know, and I think I can't speak for a veteran. I can speak as a trauma survivor myself. Knowing that this is biological, and that I was having stress responses, that it wasn't my fault, and the way that I wasn't being, it just wasn't my fault. And so when I was acting out, when I felt that just pain and that intolerable pain that I needed to drink over and use drugs over, or, you know, have sex over, act out over, and that I would just rage over. When I realized that what trauma is, that it's something that trauma is, it takes over your body. And, you know, Bessel says, he says, you can tell your spouse or your family member, your loved one, he says, I didn't just rage at you, my limbic system just raged at you. So at any moment, I have a developmental trauma brain and a body, the way that I'm wired, and I have to do everything I can to know my body, be in touch with sensations, and to calm my system down. I'm constantly working with my nervous system every day to calm it down and to regulate. Like, I have to regulate myself daily. It could be 10 times daily. It could be 10 times in the course of a meal. Hear me? A smell, a sound. Somebody could look like a perpetrator. But sometimes it could just happen out of the blue. And knowing that, like I was saying before, it's like knowing what you have. And so I have trained myself. I said that I was telling you that I was at the grocery store before, you know, I came to get on the call. And it just was a day where literally everything was going, like, whatever I tried to make a purchase, it was declined. I tried, you know, it was just like technical difficulty. Maybe there's something going on, but like literally it seemed like every action I took was met with a wall. And when I was at the grocery and then I gave them my card, it was declined, and even though there's money in my account, it wanted to go up. So on the way home, I just started talking to myself very gently and kindly. Sometimes I go in and I call up my little girl, and I will speak to her, and I'll say, listen, you know, I pictured her holding my arm on the way we walk home, and say, you know, we're okay. And I do think I have these little tricks and tools that I do to calm myself down and to calm my system down. Meditation and yoga, you know, connecting, calling Daryl, calling my friends, talking, exercising, doing things to make sure that I'm sort of exhausting my nervous system to calm it down. So there's a lot of things that I do, but in terms of the symptoms, I mean, it's just such the biggest, like in the movie, Daryl says, like once he realized that he had trauma, once he knew what he had, it was this, like the biggest moment of his life.
Yeah.
And I think that is what it is for all of us. It's such a big moment. And then we all have different ways that we can heal from it. There's not one way. Everybody has to find their own way. There's many great tools to heal from.
I agree with you, Michelle. Yeah, for me it was meditation, it was yoga, it was being out in nature. Those were the kinds of things that helped me out to overcome the complex PTSD that I had and experienced. But it was like you said, learning that it was trauma, was at the root of the problems, was a big like key. It was a big missing link. And Daryl, how did you feel when you learned that the trauma was at the root of all of the suffering that you experienced, and that the reason everything that had been so painful that it wasn't your fault?
Well, I tell Michelle, and I've told her, and I think I might have even said it in the movie, but it was the hallelujah chorus of my life when I finally got in front of this doctor who was ahead of his time, who said to me point blank, "You act like this because of something that happened to you. It's not an enzyme that didn't get blocked. It's not some bizarre thing you can treat with Prozac. You wake up screaming and cut your wrist because of something that happened to you." Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to phrase all the words, something that happened to you. Mental illness is not an airborne virus, and mental injury is not an airborne virus. It has a story, and in that story, you're the only one with no power. This happened to you. And, but the hell of it is that, Michelle talked about the limbic system, and the doctor I have right now, since the limbic system's going to have its way. Michelle Hulk, Bruce Banner gets mad, and he starts wrecking shit. And my greatest regret of my life is I didn't know what was wrong with me. And I would get mad. I mean, I have this giant mirror that's so heavy that I threw up in the hall. I broke my armoire with a baseball bat. I became a minor version of my father, and suddenly the most important thing in the world to me was my anger. And that's hell in relationships. And you don't even really understand why. Like, why am I getting so damn mad at this person? They just apologized. They made an honest mistake. Why am I speaking to them like this? And then the shame that comes after. And so it's really good to discuss it and work on it in therapy, and know that sometime this week, my anger rockets are going to want to fire. That missile wants to leave the launch pad. And if I can recognize that in advance, I can save myself a lot of problems. Boy, and just sit, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill Wilson talks about, we take a pause. Restraint of pen and tongue. You're so mad, just can't you take 10 minutes? And literally, in 2 minutes, call Michelle, call somebody, the opposite of what I have is connection, they say, connection with others. Connect with others and say, here's what I'm going through. And 5-10 minutes, I can calm down. And just the idea that I could calm down at all is mysterious and spectacular at the same time. Just the idea that I could calm down at all. There were years of waking up screaming. There were, cutting my wrist. Every drug in the whole planet, every drug there was, they would give me. I couldn't calm down. don't know if Michelle can relate or you can relate to that. Like, I can't calm down. They've given me everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I couldn't sleep it well.
In my case, I would do what my dad did, who also couldn't calm down. And I would get a bottle. He liked Beefeater. I like Jack Daniels, whatever. And you have that 3-hour period where you calm down until the Hulk gets there. And I start, you know what I mean? And then I start calling people on the phone. Hey, I want to talk to you. Son of a bitch. And then you wake up the next day and realize that you were so mad at someone that you have to apologize to. Because I hulked out, right, Michelle?
Totally. And we have to give credit that the Hulk is from our friend Dr. Jacob Ham, H-A-M. Dr. Jacob Ham is a brilliant trauma doctor. And, he has this whole video on Hulk. If you go to his website, you'll see how he explains how we get triggered and we turn into the Hulk, and how little Bruce Banner, as a boy, that his dad was an alcoholic, and he witnessed his father killing his mother in front of him.
Wow.
So it's severe trauma.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he talks about how, like, once I understand that, as soon as, like, it's like Daryl said, it's miraculous. I can say, I have the language now to say I'm triggered. And I have the awareness now, most of the time, to say I don't want to pollute my friendship. I don't want to pollute my family. I don't want to pollute my ecosystem, whoever I'm in my bubble with, right? And so I go up, and sometimes I need to leave the house, go for a walk for a couple of hours, calm down. Then I can come back and I can have a discussion. What I used to do was feel triggered, and I immediately was like fight or flight. I was immediately in fight, and so I would think it was whoever was in front of me, whoever was around. Like, and I was always looking for whose fault it was that was making me feel like this. And I was constantly on the attack. That wasn't me. No, that was my adaptive child. That was that little child who had to adapt. And she had to adapt for good reason, right? Which is why I address her a lot. So just having the awareness of I'm triggered. Like, you know, if I feel anxiety, I don't think of it as just sort of anxiety anymore. I think feeling anxiety, and then I'm thinking, am I triggered? What's happening? You know, it's not just like identified sort of on the top layer of that our system goes, anxiety, here's a pill, depression, here's a pill, you know. And there is a place for medication, but there's also so many healing modalities that literally rewire the brain, right? That rewire the brain and the body that, you know, I mean, Daryl and I have tested quite a lot of them as trauma survivors, and they really work. I mean, there's nothing like, you know, we could go to a 12-step meeting and then go to coffee with our friends and, you know, we used to go to the coffee shop and sit there for a couple hours. You know, Daryl would say, you know, I'm going to be symptom-free for like the next 2 hours. Because we were together, and we were in connection. And connection is the opposite of trauma. Connection is the opposite of addiction. Connection is the opposite of suicide. You know, the power of connection and love. And it's really about relationships, and developing relationships with people who understand. You know, it's like my partner, you know, the people who are close to me understand that I'm a trauma survivor, and they understand that I can say, excuse me, I'm feeling really triggered right now. I'm going to go in the other room, or I'm going to go for a walk. They understand that, you know, that they understand what I have. That's really important that your loved ones and your friends understand that, so they can be supportive too.
Absolutely, and I agree. And Daryl, when you were talking about it, was, boy, I used to drink Johnny Walker Red. That was what I had. That was my butt. That was the way I wanted to feel good. Whenever I was not feeling happy and moving that way, and it was, it was just because I didn't like the way, I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the way to be able to understand that whole mind, body, soul connection. I didn't have the awareness for it. And veterans often blame, and then you would do something, and then you're on the phone with somebody, or you do something, and then you wake up the next morning, you're like, oh my God, what did I just do? God, and then you got that on top of the stuff that you're dealing with. So you just compound it, and you compound it, and it becomes this big Gordian knot. And veterans, all of us here have survived trauma. Veterans often blame themselves for not being able to push through the trauma that they've survived on their own. They resist the treatment. And there's a lot of self-blame and shame in asking for help. Gosh, I'd like to ask both of you, is there any advice or encouragement each of you can give to veterans about why understanding trauma is so important, how it works in the mind and body, and how it not only affects them, but also the family and generations after?
Michelle, you want to go first?
Well, the first, something Bessel Vanderkolk says in the film, he says that victims spend their whole life trying to make amends for the perpetrator.
That's a huge statement, yeah.
Harold talks about in the movie, and I have experienced it, in my own life as a trauma survivor. Like he said, well, I won't give it away, but thinking that I did things to myself, thinking, and just basically having my baseline was it's my fault. Mm-hmm. Living life, my baseline is whatever's happening. Before I even walk in the room, I'm going to walk in this room, and whatever might happen is going to be my fault.
Yeah.
Over and over and over, like that was just a belief. So that is a very normal and common thing and also in our culture, and especially I would say with men that are not supported in coming forward and telling the truth and being sensitive and having feelings and going through something, because men are supposed to be fixers, right?
That's right.
Men are supposed to fix everything. They're not supposed to have a problem. And that's just not the case, And so, I mean, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I think, the first time I ever went into rehab, been to rehab a couple of times. The first time was sort of for cocaine and drinking, but while I was there, this was Hazleton in Minnesota, they didn't want to take me. They wanted to send me to a trauma unit, which I eventually went to in Arizona. I should have gone to the trauma unit. But one of the things the psychologists at Hazleton said to me was, the key for you to stay alive, the most important thing is going to be your ability, your willingness to ask for help. And I think that's why I lived. People go, I don't know how to fucking live through that shit. This guy hammered it into my head. He's like, no. You can't fix an injured brain with an injured brain. Do you understand? You need help. Your injured brain needs outside help. Give it a moment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. It's like saying, it's the only thing where the patient wants to operate on themselves.
Yeah. Yes.
Table, and we think we're supposed to be the surgeon as well.
That's true.
Right. That is kind of brilliant. Where did that come from?
I must have heard it. You never make any.
Yeah, it's the only.
But I take credit for it.
The only. Good. The only syndrome where the patient wants to operate on themselves.
Yeah,
It's true.
yeah, yeah.
Well, and it's so important, I think, you know, in learning how to be able to break down this stigma and to break down those barriers that prevent people from getting the help that they need. And I think one of the things that's so wonderful about your film, Cracked Up, is it helps you to give the, you know, like you said, opens up. For men, we don't tend to, we tend to, like you said, to be fixer-uppers, and we can't go, well, wow, no, we're human beings too. And I think it's such an amazing film. So how do we start to begin to break down this barriers of stigma and the shame that's connected to these early childhood traumas?
I want to say that when Michelle approached me about the idea of helping people, and I did love that idea, and made me feel somehow that I could make up for the times in my life when I ruined things. I ruined family outings. I ruined dinners. I ruined get-togethers. I ruined relationships. I was just too mad. And so helping someone, you know, was nice. But I think, too, I really wanted to catch bad guys with this fucking film. I wanted the world to understand that when we act like this, we don't want to. We don't even know what's wrong. Someone turned me into, you know, it's like the Frankenstein monster. They're chasing the Frankenstein monster with a torch, and the Frankenstein monster's looking at him like, you know what, I was in 8 different graves last night, right? And some guy sewed me together and electrocuted me, and now I'm Frankenstein, and you're chasing me with a fucking torch? Every time I would see a perp arrested on TV, I would say, wait. You know, there's one more person you need to put in the squad car, and that's his Dr. Frankenstein. You know, who did this? Who created this? You know, I think Michelle, did Oprah Winfrey say something about, now I don't ask what's wrong, I ask what happened? Are you familiar with that quote?
Well, she was actually quoting the ACE study.
Yeah.
From what's wrong with you to what happened to you. Oprah said the most important, you know, the most important thing she had ever heard, and which for her, you know, she did a 60 Minutes piece and interviewed Dr. Bruce Perry, and she said it was the most important show she had ever done.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the human heart is sort of so mysterious, and for my father to explain what it was like to be in war as a part of his making amends and departing the earth, it was a miracle. The way I felt like I've had a dad my whole life, because I grew up to be the same angry kid guy, you know? I ruined stuff too, but it was great to find out why. And as Michelle says, not trying to operate on myself. I can't do it. Injured brain cannot fix an injured brain. And you know, I heard something in New Orleans once, the issues are in the tissues. Well, they're living in there. All this, right, Michelle, the trauma stores. And it wants to express itself sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think, you know, we need to look at our systems and generational trauma, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's generational, and it goes back, you know, hundreds and probably hundreds of thousands of years. But yeah, I want to hold my perpetrators accountable, and at the same time, only doing that isn't going to fix the problem. It's not going to break the cycle. What's going to break the cycle is this generation understanding trauma, understanding, you know, when I understand and when we understand why somebody else did something to me, it's not to excuse and it's not to exonerate, but to understand and have like that much compassion for what they went through, that it happened, to ask questions, what happened to them, right? It's like when I see the school shootings, and I see a kid who goes in and shoots up a school, my first question, I'm sitting there in front of the TV and I'm like, I want to know about that kid's household. I want to know about that kid's parents. I wonder if that kid was abused. I would bet $1 million on it if I had it.
Yep.
And they don't think about that. It's just that kid is the bad guy. And yes, he did something heinous and horrible. But it keeps happening and happening and happening, right? And it's increasing and getting more and more and more. But it's like, when I understand, it's the first time I realized, it's the first, like Bessel says this brilliant line in the movie. He says, when I said, do I have to forgive my perpetrators? And he said, no. And we need to forgive ourselves for all the ways we tried to survive. I need to forgive myself for all the ways I tried to survive. And a lot of the ways I tried to survive was not nice. The ways that I acted out on others was not cool. But I can look at that and say, I was in fight or flight. I was in fight or flight freeze. And then I think, well, so was my perpetrators. They were in that. They were doing what they taught. They were acting out in their own way. And as I said, it's not to forgive, but to understand. And then I realized that it wasn't personal. That hurt people. It wasn't personal to me. As somebody very, very, very wounded did things to me.
And it's true. People that hurt people hurt people.
And then,
Go ahead, Daryl.
yeah, and in the case of like, in the case of like my father, the last year of his life, I started bringing my friend Eddie, who's a cop and pretty high in national security in the country, ex-cop, ex-FBI. And I would bring him down to Florida with me, and he would tell my father, help him understand, what a marvelous thing he'd done on Earth. To be a soldier, but B, those, well, Nazis he thought were a little bit different, but those Korean guys, just to sort of forgive them a little bit. Like, they're conscript soldiers, you know, it's a crazy process, but it takes time. But the old cop talking to the old soldier, well, the young cop talking to the old soldier, beautiful thing. But my father didn't get that way by accident. Neither did I. Right? Neither did Michelle.
Yeah.
You know, someone really had to come along and help us, and then we eventually, the biggest thing, the next biggest thing was, how do I forgive the perpetrator? How do I forgive this person that made me this way? And that's another webinar. And it's doable, but I mean, the first thing is that when I'm reminded that forgiveness isn't for you, it's for them. I mean, it's not for them, it's for you. So we really just want to cut them loose, you know, instead of thinking about them at 4 o'clock in the morning when I wake up every fucking night. The minute I would wake up, a conversation would start. What am I going to say? What should I have said? What am I going to do? And the whole notion that if I could kill someone that hurt me, that revenge, the notion that it was just going to be okay, you know, that's a story I would like to tell one time. I needed doctors. I needed great doctors. I needed spiritual. I needed, what is it, Michelle? Mind, body, spirit?
Yeah.
I was sick all over. All of me was sick. But the guy convinced me, keep asking for help, and eventually you might get it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, there's
And I
one
did.
answer. I love that Bessel van der Kolk. He says that in the film, there's no one answer. Everybody has to discover what the answer is for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's yoga might work for one person, it might not work for another person. EMDR might work for one person. Somatic therapy might work for one person. One person might need medication, another person might not need medication. You know, but the thing is, there is a lot of help and a lot of resources on our website. We have a lot of resources. Correctupmovie.com. We have a lot of resources, and knowledge is power. Knowledge is really power. Really understanding it. I mean, every time I just went to an international trauma. Bessel's International Trauma Conference a few months ago, and I was weeping, and I've been studying this for like 10 years, you know, and I was weeping at this one doctor talking about the brain and what it does, because every time I learn about it, especially the biology of it and how my brain works and what sets me off, it continually reminds me that it's not my fault, and that it wasn't my fault, and that it lifts pain. So, you know, like, read The Body Keeps the Score. It's Bessel's amazing book, and there's a lot of resources, a lot of help, luckily. Where when Daryl was trying to figure this out, and I was trying to figure this out many years ago, you know, there's so much misdiagnosis, and it's not as much anymore. It's still, there's still some, but it's not as much. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who are becoming trauma informed, and there is, and we can recover from it. That is the good news. Mm-hmm. That is the good news. Is even if it's painful, I would say, you know, just hold on, keep taking the next step, keep doing the next right thing, mm-hmm. you know, and sort of trust that the healing, your healing process will reveal itself. You know, I had this woman. She wrote in yesterday. I don't know if I sent it to you, Daryl, but I found it really funny. But she says, I know my husband watched your film. He won't admit it, but he's being much nicer to me. She's like, thank you so much. He won't admit it, she kept saying, but he watched it because he's now listening to me, and he's now sort of acknowledging things, and he's communicating, but he won't admit he watched it. She's like, but I know he watched it. So, you know, I mean, we've had people tell us that probably 6 different people have specifically wrote in to say, I decided not to commit suicide after watching the movie, or after seeing us on a Dr. Oz or an interview. I mean, and then a lot of people, you know, just write and say the movie helped me believe that I wasn't born broken.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest messages I think everybody can get, is that. I can see why it has kept, this movie, Cracked Up, has kept people from committing suicide, from doing those extreme things, to giving them hope. It is the hope and inspiration that people who are broken need. I can't express my admiration for both of you for what you have done and what you have accomplished with this film. Could you briefly share, because we're at the close of the show, just the website and what you have next coming up, and how people can watch the film, and where to go?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Yes, if you can hear me, because you're a little. So our website is crackedupmovie.com. And the best way to find out what we're doing, what's coming up, we have a lot of really amazing events coming up. And we started a series called The Evolving Conversation, where we have experts come on and talk with us about all different aspects of trauma. But if you would sign up, we'll send you out emails of you know, the news and updates of when we're speaking and what kind of cool things we're doing. So and there's a lot of resources on the website as well that can hopefully be helpful.
Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I apologize for some of the technical issues that we had. Oh my gosh. But I always ask before I close the show out, my guests, if you could give, each of you could give one piece of advice, one bit of wisdom from your life experience, what would it be? Either one of you?
I don't know.
I think you said it, Daryl.
But
Ask for help.
maybe that's it. That's what all the doctors tell me. They're like, I don't know what you got in your head. Someone told you to ask for help. You know, my father was saying that as a soldier, when he would be in a situation, every day he tried to learn something new. And I'm still learning new things, but it always goes back down to asking for help. But also, I think when people see the movie, they think that, well, I'm cured. I don't, little birds flying in the morning and do my laundry for me, and like a Disney movie and shit. But I still have to work at this stuff, right, Michelle?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, I don't wake up screaming anymore. I don't cut myself anymore. I mean, there's a lot of things I don't do anymore. But I'm still not quite right. I still need help. And just not as much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do cognitive therapy exercises. I try to do 10 minutes of yoga in the morning. I take Epsom salt baths. I go to meetings online. I call for people that have a similar condition, and we connect with one another. And a lot of days, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Michelle, but there are many days that are pretty good, no?
Yeah. I mean, I like to talk about what I have to do to regulate. To regulate myself. I wake up in the morning and I don't feel so regulated when I wake up.
Right.
I wake up, I meditate, I go for a walk. Sometimes, like, I've been walking 6 miles in the morning. Like, I just need that. I need to exercise. I need to eat healthy. I don't always eat healthy, but I know that when I do eat healthy, I exercise, I do meditation, I get my exercise in. I also am 12-step Zoom meetings, and I connect with others that are like-minded, and I try to do our social distance visits, and I would say, really connection, love and connection is the key. It's the thing. Relationships. It's really, to me, I would say that is the key. That is the answer. Love and connection. Go where it's warm. Put your hand on your heart and just. I mean, sometimes I can just still and beat myself up. I mean, what are you beating yourself up for? What's going on? It's just like a natural baseline. As I said, I can return to it at any minute.
That's right. And it is. It's a natural baseline that we have.
It's so good. Everybody give yourself a hug.
That's right.
Be kind to you. Be kind to yourself. Be loving to yourself.
Yes.
That's the practice. Love and kindness.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Daryl Hammond, Michelle Eisrick, thank you so much for joining us here on the council.
Can I just say my name is Michelle Eisrick. Eisrick.
I'm so sorry. My apologies, Eisrick. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But thank you both very much for spending this hour with us and with me. It's been an honor and a privilege. And folks, thank you for tuning into the council. I thank KUHS for all your support, and thank you, Henry, for all that you do back here. Folks, the council is adjourned. We will be back next week with another fantastic guest. Tune in next Friday. May you all be well. May you all be free of pain and suffering. May you all be whole. God bless everyone.
Take care.